She walked into the courtroom slowly, as if each step carried extra weight. The room felt colder than the air outside. Wooden benches lined the walls, polished and hard, just like the expressions on the faces around her. Her hands trembled slightly, so she held them together to keep them still. She felt small there, smaller than she had ever felt before, like a child who had wandered into a place meant only for powerful people. Her eyes moved across the room and then stopped. Linda and George were already seated across from her. Her parents. They sat straight, shoulders stiff, faces tight and unreadable. They did not look at her the way parents usually look at their daughter. There was no warmth, no concern. Only distance. It hurt more than she expected, even though she had prepared herself for this moment for weeks. She lowered her gaze, pretending to fix her coat, but her mind drifted back in time. She remembered being a little girl, sitting at the kitchen table, her feet not even touching the floor. Linda's voice would fill the room, calm but sharp, reminding her how much they worked for her. George would nod, silent but firm, as if agreement did not need words. They always talked about sacrifices. Long hours. Missed dreams. Everything they had given up so she could have a better life. Those words followed her everywhere as she grew up. At school. At home. Even in her sleep. Whenever she failed a test or looked tired, they reminded her again. We gave you everything. Don't waste it. She learned early that love came with conditions, and silence came when she disappointed them. Back in the courtroom, the silence felt heavy, pressing against her chest. She could hear small sounds she never noticed before. The shuffle of papers. A cough from the back row. The quiet ticking of a clock somewhere on the wall. Each sound made her heart beat faster. She felt like everyone was watching her, judging her, even before the case had started. She sat down carefully, smoothing her skirt, trying to look calm. Inside, fear twisted tightly. She wondered if the judge would see her the same way her parents did. As someone who failed. Someone ungrateful. The thought made her throat burn. She dared to look at Linda again. Her mother's eyes were fixed straight ahead, lips pressed together. No sign of emotion. No memory of bedtime stories or gentle hands brushing hair away from her face. Just a woman who looked ready to defend herself, not her child. George sat beside her, jaw clenched, hands folded like stone. He had always been like that when angry or disappointed. Quiet. Final. She remembered the day she left home. The argument. The shouting. Linda's tears that felt more like anger than sadness. George's last words still echoed in her mind, cold and steady. If you walk out, don't come back asking for help. She had walked out anyway, shaking but determined. That was the moment everything changed. Now, sitting here, she wondered if that choice would be used against her. She felt exposed, like her entire life was about to be taken apart piece by piece in front of strangers. Her mistakes. Her fears. Her pain. All of it laid bare. The courtroom door closed behind her with a soft thud, but it sounded loud in her ears. It felt final, like there was no turning back. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. She reminded herself that she had a voice too, even if it had taken her years to believe it. Still, the feeling of being judged would not leave her. It clung to her skin, heavy and uncomfortable. She had not spoken yet. No one had accused her yet. But deep down, she already felt on trial. Not just for this case, but for her entire life. As she waited for the judge to enter, she stared at the floor and thought about the little girl she once was. The girl who only wanted to be enough. The girl who believed that if she tried harder, her parents would finally be proud. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. The tension in the room thickened with every passing second. She knew this was only the beginning, and whatever was about to happen would change her forever. Linda was the first to speak. Her voice was calm, almost practiced, as if she had repeated these words many times before. She did not look at her daughter when she began. She looked at the judge, straight and confident, like someone who believed she was right. She talked about years of effort, long nights, and hard choices. She said they gave their daughter everything a parent could give. Education. Support. A safe home. She said all of it clearly, without shaking, without pause. George followed. His voice was deeper, slower, but just as firm. He spoke about money spent, opportunities created, and doors opened. He said they pushed her because they wanted her to succeed. He said they never asked for much in return, only responsibility and gratitude. Then he said the words that cut the deepest. He said she threw it all away. The girl sat still as their words filled the room. Each sentence felt like a small strike to her chest. She had expected this, yet it still hurt more than she imagined. Hearing strangers talk badly about her would have been painful. Hearing her own parents do it felt unbearable. It was like being erased, like her struggles and pain never existed. Linda continued, listing moments from her past. A missed opportunity. A job she left. A choice they did not agree with. Each example was told as proof of failure. Linda's voice stayed steady, but there was something sharp underneath it. Disappointment mixed with anger. She painted a picture of a daughter who was careless and ungrateful. The girl wanted to speak, to explain, but she knew it was not her turn. She clenched her hands tighter, nails pressing into her skin. She focused on breathing, afraid that if she didn't, she might break down in front of everyone. Her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if others could hear it. She glanced around the courtroom. Some people nodded slightly as her parents spoke. Others watched quietly, faces blank. She felt exposed again, like she was standing alone under a bright light. The story being told about her felt incomplete, but she had no power to stop it yet. George spoke again, this time more emotionally. He said they were embarrassed. He said they were tired of defending her choices to others. He said they came to court not out of anger, but out of disappointment. That word stayed with her. Disappointment. It was a word she had grown up with. A word that followed her through childhood, through school, through every decision she made. As he spoke, memories flooded her mind. Nights spent crying quietly in her room. Days when she tried harder, studied longer, worked more, just to hear a kind word. She remembered bringing home achievements that were met with silence because they were not enough. Those moments never made it into her parents' story. Her throat tightened. She swallowed hard, fighting the urge to cry. She told herself to stay strong. This was not just about proving something to the judge. It was about finally being heard. Linda ended her statement by saying they had done their part as parents. She said what happened after was their daughter's responsibility. She sat back down, expression firm, as if closing a chapter. George followed, his face unreadable. The room felt heavier after they finished. The air seemed thick, hard to breathe. The girl felt smaller than before, like she had been pushed further into a corner. She kept her eyes down, afraid that if she looked up, she would see only judgment. Inside, her thoughts raced. Was this how the world saw her? Through her parents' words alone? Was she really nothing more than a list of failures? Fear crept into her chest, cold and sharp. What if the judge believed them completely? She reminded herself quietly that there was another side to the story. A side filled with pressure, control, and pain. A side no one had asked about yet. She held on to that thought like a lifeline. As the judge made notes, the girl sat in silence, waiting. Her turn would come. And when it did, she knew she would have to find the courage to speak, even if her voice shook. When it was finally her turn, she felt her legs weaken as she stood up. For a brief moment, the room seemed to spin. She placed her hand on the table to steady herself. Every eye in the courtroom turned toward her, and the weight of their attention pressed down on her shoulders. She took a deep breath, slow and careful, the way she had learned to do when fear tried to take control. She began softly. Her voice was not strong at first, but it was honest. She said she was not there to deny what her parents had given her. She said she knew they worked hard and made sacrifices. She said she was grateful for the education, the home, the chances. Saying those words felt important, even though they hurt her pride. She did not want to sound ungrateful. She wanted to sound truthful. Then she spoke about the pressure. She explained how, from a young age, she felt like love had rules. Good grades meant approval. Obedience meant peace. Any mistake meant silence or disappointment. She described growing up always afraid of failing, not because she hated failure, but because she feared losing her parents' respect. Her voice shook as she said this, but she did not stop. She told the court how her dreams never fully belonged to her. Every choice was watched, corrected, or questioned. When she wanted to try something different, she was reminded of sacrifices again. When she felt tired or unsure, she was told to be stronger. Over time, she said, that pressure became a heavy weight she carried everywhere. She talked about her struggles after leaving home. How the world felt loud and confusing without rules to follow. How she made mistakes because she was learning to live for herself for the first time. She admitted she failed sometimes. She admitted she walked away from things that scared her. Her honesty filled the room with a quiet tension. She spoke about Ethan, the man she once trusted. She said he listened to her when no one else did. She said she leaned on him when she felt lost. At first, he felt like safety. But slowly, that safety turned into control. She did not go into details, but her words were enough to show that relationship had changed her deeply. It was another part of her life her parents never wanted to hear about. As she continued, her voice grew steadier. She explained that she was not lazy or careless. She was overwhelmed. She was trying to breathe in a life where she always felt watched and measured. She said she did not throw opportunities away. She said she struggled under expectations she never chose. She looked briefly at her parents. Linda avoided her eyes. George stared straight ahead. There was no reaction, no sign that they heard her pain. Still, she kept speaking. This moment was not for them anymore. It was for herself. She told the judge that walking away from home was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of survival. She said she needed space to understand who she was without fear. Saying that out loud made her chest feel lighter, even though tears filled her eyes. When she finished, her voice grew quiet again. She thanked the court for listening. She sat down slowly, her heart racing, unsure of what would happen next. But one thing was clear to her now. For the first time, she had told her story in her own words, and that alone felt like a small victory. After she finished speaking, the courtroom stayed quiet for a long moment. It was not the calm kind of silence. It felt tense, like everyone was holding their breath. The judge looked down at the papers in front of him, then up at her, then at Linda and George. His expression did not change, but his eyes showed focus. He was listening more closely now. The judge asked a few questions, slow and careful. He asked about dates, decisions, and timelines. He asked her parents when certain events happened and why some things were handled the way they were. Linda answered quickly, confidently. George nodded along. But small cracks began to show. Their answers did not always match. Some details were missing. Some moments were skipped over. Then her lawyer stood up. His voice was calm, respectful, but firm. He said there were records the court had not yet reviewed. He asked permission to present them. The judge nodded. The first thing shown was a set of messages. Emails and texts between her and her parents from years ago. Messages where she asked for help, not money, but understanding. Messages where she tried to explain how overwhelmed she felt. The tone in her words was soft, almost careful, like she was afraid to say the wrong thing. The responses from her parents were short and distant. Some were about responsibility. Some were about expectations. None asked how she was feeling. As the messages were read, the room grew quieter. Linda shifted in her seat. George's jaw tightened. The girl stared at the table, her heart beating fast. She had not seen those messages in a long time. Hearing them out loud made old feelings rise again. Fear. Sadness. Hope that was never answered. Next came records from her school and workplace. Reports showing stress-related absences. Notes from counselors who suggested rest and support. Times when she asked for a break but was encouraged to push harder instead. These details painted a different picture. Not of a careless young woman, but of someone slowly burning out. A witness was called. A former family friend, a woman named Claire. She spoke gently but clearly. She said she remembered how much pressure was placed on the girl. She said she saw how often she tried to please her parents. She remembered times when the girl cried quietly while her parents talked about success and failure like they were the only things that mattered. Linda shook her head slightly, but she did not interrupt. George stared at the floor. Then the judge asked about Ethan. Not the relationship itself, but the timing. The lawyer showed dates that lined up. The relationship began shortly after a period when the girl had been cut off emotionally and financially by her parents. It became clear she was vulnerable at that time. Alone. Searching for support anywhere she could find it. The judge leaned back slightly, fingers pressed together. His eyes moved slowly from one side of the room to the other. He asked Linda and George if they were aware of how deeply their daughter had struggled during those years. Linda hesitated. She said they knew she was stressed, but they believed stress built strength. George added that hardship was part of life. The judge nodded, but his face grew serious. He asked another question. He asked if they ever considered that their idea of support might feel like pressure to their child. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. No answer came. The girl felt her chest tighten. She did not know whether to feel scared or relieved. The truth was coming out, piece by piece, not through anger or shouting, but through quiet facts. It was strange to see her life laid out like this, examined carefully by strangers. Yet for the first time, the story felt complete. The courtroom atmosphere changed. People leaned forward slightly. The feeling of judgment shifted. It was no longer aimed only at her. It moved across the room, touching everyone involved. The judge made a few notes, then looked up again. His voice was steady as he said the court would take a short pause before continuing. As the sound of movement filled the room, the girl stayed seated. Her hands were shaking, but her breathing felt easier. She did not look at her parents. She did not need to. For the first time, the truth was no longer trapped inside her. It was out in the open, standing on its own. And she sensed that something important was about to happen next. When the judge returned, the room settled into silence almost instantly. Everyone straightened, as if they could feel that something serious was about to be said. The judge did not rush. He adjusted his papers, then looked directly at Linda and George. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. He began by saying that providing food, shelter, and education was important, but it was not the full meaning of parenting. He said that opportunity alone did not guarantee emotional safety. The words hung in the air, heavy and clear. The girl felt her heart pound as she listened, afraid to hope too much. The judge spoke about responsibility, not just the kind measured in money or success, but the kind measured in care. He said parents also carry the duty to notice when their child is struggling. He explained that constant pressure, even when meant well, could cause harm. As he spoke, the courtroom grew so quiet that even breathing felt loud. He turned slightly and addressed the girl. His tone softened. He said her story showed effort, not laziness. He said her choices, even the wrong ones, came from confusion and emotional exhaustion, not from disrespect or carelessness. Hearing that made her eyes fill with tears. She blinked hard, trying to stay composed. Then the judge looked back at her parents. His expression was firm now. He said that reminding a child of sacrifices repeatedly could turn love into a burden. He said that using opportunity as a weapon in moments of failure was unfair. Linda's face paled slightly. George's hands tightened together. The judge paused, letting his words sink in. No one moved. No one spoke. It felt as if time itself had slowed. The girl realized this was the moment everyone would remember. This was the moment when the room truly froze. He stated that the court could not accept a one-sided story. He said the evidence showed a pattern of emotional neglect, even if it was unintentional. He made it clear that good intentions did not erase harm. The words landed quietly, but their impact was strong. Linda finally looked at her daughter, but the look was not anger. It was shock. George stared ahead, his face stiff, as if he were struggling to understand what he was hearing. They had expected praise, not questions. Support, not accountability. The judge concluded by saying that this case was not about punishment. It was about truth. He said the truth was often uncomfortable, but necessary. He added that the girl deserved to be heard without being labeled a failure. For a moment after he finished, no one spoke. The silence felt different now. It was no longer heavy with judgment. It was filled with realization. The girl felt her chest rise and fall as she breathed, feeling something loosen inside her. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply sat there, stunned. Someone in authority had finally seen her pain and named it. Someone had said out loud what she had felt her entire life. As the judge prepared to move toward the final steps of the case, the girl understood that whatever happened next, she was no longer invisible. And that truth alone had changed everything. When the hearing finally came to an end, the judge gave his final instructions and closed the case. His voice was calm, almost gentle now. People began to move, chairs scraping softly against the floor, papers being gathered. The courtroom that once felt cold and threatening slowly returned to an ordinary room. But for her, nothing felt ordinary anymore. She remained seated for a moment, letting everything sink in. Her hands still trembled, but not from fear. It was from release. A long-held weight was lifting, little by little. She felt tired in a deep way, the kind of tired that comes after surviving something heavy. Linda and George stood up across the room. For a second, it seemed like Linda might say something, but she didn't. Her face was unreadable, caught somewhere between pride and regret. George avoided looking at his daughter altogether. They walked past her without a word. That silence hurt, but it did not break her. Not anymore. She stood and slowly walked toward the exit. Each step felt lighter than the one before. The large doors opened, and natural light spilled inside. It warmed her face, and she paused, letting it touch her skin. For the first time that day, she took a full breath without her chest tightening. Outside the courtroom, the noise of the world returned. Voices, footsteps, distant traffic. Life moving forward. She realized she was no longer afraid of that movement. The fear of judgment, the fear of disappointing others, had lost its grip. She thought about her past. The little girl who tried so hard to be perfect. The young woman who felt lost and ashamed. She felt compassion for them now, not blame. They did the best they could with what they were given. She did not know what her relationship with her parents would look like after this. Maybe it would heal slowly. Maybe it would remain distant. But she understood something important. Their approval no longer defined her worth. As she walked away from the building, she felt something close to peace. Not happiness. Not victory. Just peace. The quiet knowledge that her voice mattered, even when it shook. That her story deserved to be told, even if it made others uncomfortable. She stepped into the sunlight and continued forward, ready to build a life that belonged to her.